Well, it seems like it is almost, to me, it feels like a dystopian kind of idea happening right now because things are becoming more efficient, and it seems companies like Google are considered very good companies, ethical companies, but where does ethics fit into this singularity equation? Is it good? Is it bad? What, or we just don't really know?
Practical ethics in terms of dealing with situations is something that we've had thousands of years to develop. And in fact, different cultures, you can actually see that there is a dialogue about ethics. Like, the teacher says, well, what do you do in such a situation? And the golden rule is an exceptional thing that is very easy to say, and it's pretty subtle, but it's easy to say. There are a lot of situations where the proper ethical thing to do is actually, it takes a lot of thought. I mean, it's not, it is the difference between doing right and doing wrong, but it's not easy. It's not easy in all situations. There are all sorts of problems, and for the types of things that we've had in prior civilizations, we've had thousands of years to work this out. And the scary thing here is that we're moving so fast that I am not concerned about the fact that ethics is, that there is no ethics, or ethics is impossible, but I am concerned that we are moving through differences in situation that are so fast that we don't have the time to build up the ethical base for figuring out what's going on. So that's how I look at it, rather than some sort of stark, machines versus ethics types of things. I think there are some very frightening things about the present world. In fact, when people ask me about the likelihood of the singularity, I say, I think it's the most likely non-catastrophic scenario. I can list, for the rest of the day, I can list catastrophic scenarios, and they're not all technological. I mean, some of them are just Mother Nature, just whacking us. That even if we mind our own business, Mother Nature has demonstrated that it can whack us. So there's all sorts of problems like that. In particular with the technology, though, if we restrict that and ignore other things, I think there's not nearly enough attention paid to the problem that happens if we get widespread equipment failures. Like right now, with all the computers well, it used to be that you don't have to worry about uppity computers because you can just pull the plug. Not very many people say that anymore because they realize that actually it's the opposite is true. Right now in Boston, if all the computers stopped working, it's hard to imagine a greater disaster short of a nuclear war, because all your cars will stop. Not all your cars. All the cars that are less than 30 years old, 25 years old will stop. So your supply chain stop. Forget about all sorts of local casualties like aircraft falling out of the sky, but your air travel would stop. All sorts of things people don't even think about. For instance, probably the heating in this building would stop. So we've gotten so far into using computers in a ubiquitous way because it's an economic win. And humans have this thing that if something feels good to do, and if the risks are not easily quantified, especially if there's no prior history of disaster, we'll just bite into anything. And so this is, since I often talk optimistically about technology, I always like to bring that up, that there has to be some thought given to backups, to failure modes. I really wish there were people that had a hobby of trying to build as much civilization as they can without any transistors, without any computers at all, just so that they could be around if we need them. And in particular, no one's going to get rid of the, I don't believe anybody's going to get rid of the computers, but there should be an analysis made of what the critical failure paths are. Like, to me, transporting of critical goods into the city is, you don't want to stop that. So vehicles and emergency vehicles, it would be nice if they could run without computers. You know, the way God intended cars to operate. So that is a sort of a threat that I see.
So I'm going to try to kind of wrap up here. Yesterday at the virtual reality discussion, it seemed like you do have a positive view of technology, but this singularity seems very scary. How do you kind of deal with those conflicting notions? How do you make sense of that?
I think actually the singularity is scary because of the prospect of sudden onset. That actually it comes down to the fact that humans have always wanted certain things. You know, we'd like to live forever, various things, and since we've never been able to do it, we haven't had to look at those things carefully. And if you look at them carefully and you really go from a maximally optimistic outcome, you start to see that there are consequences to what you're talking about that are scary. So if somebody was trotting out these ideas and say, it's going to happen 100,000 years from now, you know, I think most of us actually get sort of a warm feeling, you know, yes, it's nice to know that human striving will eventually lead on to something better. I mean, we don't expect the human race to last forever. So if it grew up to be something nicer, that's great. But then if someone says, and it's going to happen before you retire, all of a sudden, then everything you're saying about it being scary suddenly comes down with a big clang. So it really, to me, it really is the speed of onset that makes it scary. And the response is, if it can't be stopped, which I think is, if it can happen, I think it will happen. If it can't be stopped short of the world ending, then the thing is to try to figure out how to accommodate that sort of speed of change in one's speed of response.
So, finally, what is your prediction?
Prediction?
Yes.
Oh, well, as a science fiction writer, and I think serious planners also look at things this way right now, outside of science fiction, that no one knows what the future is. And the idea of planning for one particular future is really bad policy. So what you do is you think of a number of different scenarios that could happen, and you work out the consequences of the scenarios, but even more important, you work out what would be the symptoms that you're moving in that direction, and then you watch for those symptoms and you plan around those symptoms. And so the question of what I'm predicting is, you know, actually I don't remember the exact words you used in your question. You asked me what.
I just asked you for a prediction.
Oh yeah. So I really am not in the prediction business. I do think that the singularity is the most likely non-catastrophic outcome for the next few years. There are all sorts of catastrophic ones. Many of them you see in the newspaper. Some of them, like what I was saying about the failure of computers, you don't see so much. But the non-catastrophic outcomes that don't involve the singularity are kind of strange and a little bit hard to